Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It was a great opportunity for me to finally be here in today's presentation. My name is Miss Amelya Enjelita from Information System Batch 2023 as a finalist of Mr. and Miss President University 2024. So, in today's presentation, we're gonna talk about a topic, tackling depression and anxiety in Indonesia, focusing on role of culture and social support. We all ever heard about this, right? Depression and anxiety. Depression is a constant feeling of sadness and loss of interest of anything you do at your daily habits. Meanwhile, anxiety is the feeling of worry, scared, or even nervousness in your daily life that is not normal at all. People often experience this both feeling, depression and anxiety, at the same time. Ultimately, in Indonesia. Here I'm having some data from the Mental Health Caucus Jakarta. There are three basic senses why mental health in Indonesia is very urgent and it must be immediately mitigated, namely high stigma, an environment that is not friendly for mental health, and the phenomenon of self-diagnosis. The first point, high stigma. Imagine if you're suffering from mental health problem and people constantly think that you're weird or even crazy. That is what stigma is. It's when people think negative of mental health. And the second point was the environment that is not friendly to mental health. Because there is no much awareness about mental health in Indonesia, people doesn't really know what mental health are. And because of the stigma that we're having here, it's causing that environment that is not friendly at all for those who suffer from mental health problem. And also, there is no much psychologist or even counselor here in Indonesia. The next point was the self-diagnosis. Since there is no much psychologist or even counselor in Indonesia, people often do self-diagnosis. Because mental health is just as important as physical health. Imagine if you try to think, if you try to determine that you have a mental health problem or not, you try to cure it yourself, it could only make things worse. Now let's move on to the level of analysis. Here we're going to analyze some aspect from mental health issues. The first aspect was the individual. Individual who experiencing these mental health problems such as depression and anxiety might feel constant feeling of sadness all the time. They might have loss of productivity, they might have bad relationship problems, or they even might have self-destructive behavior that we're going to talk later in the impact session. The next aspect that we're going to talk is the social aspect. Since there's no much awareness about mental health problem here in Indonesia, social pressure might be so concerning for those who suffer from mental health problem. Imagine if you're suffering from some mental health problem like depression and anxiety, and then you try to adapt, you try to act normal in the society. It could be pressure for you, and it also could be a pressure for those social, because they don't know how to act around you. The next aspect was the cultural aspect. Here, we're living in Indonesia. Indonesia is a diverse country that has so many culture. And since the beginning, since childhood, we have been taught that to talk about our feelings is a taboo thing. Meanwhile, mental health is all about feelings. It's all about talk about what you have inside. And if it's a taboo thing to talk about our feelings, how's we gonna determine about our mental health status? That's why cultural is really giving a big impact in mental health problem that Indonesian fellows have. Next, we're gonna move on to the impact session. We're gonna talk about impact that happens in some aspect. The first aspect was the individual aspect. As we talked earlier, individuals have so many impact in their life, bad impact ultimately. First, they might have bad relationship problem, they might have less of productivity, and they might have self-destructive behavior. This self-destructive behavior can come from a small range to a really large range. They might come as starting from biting their nails that could come to a physical health problem. And they might do alcohol or drugs, or even more bad, like suicidal thoughts that could lead to suicide itself. Imagine, mental health is that important that it could lead to cost a life. Next aspect was the family's aspect. Imagine if your loved one was suffering from these mental health issues. Because you doesn't really aware, you doesn't really know what our mental health problems are. You don't know how to act and how to heal your loved ones. And you might feel the bad vibes and the bad energy that they're causing since they have this depression and anxiety problem. It could be a pressure for both parties. The next aspect was the community aspect. Imagine if you're working at a company and then you have a colleague that suffer from mental health problems such as depression and anxiety. They might be less productive than you. And the less of productivity might causing the economic burden in your company. See, there's much impact in the communities of mental health problem. Now, after analyze some aspect and talk about the impact, we can conclude here. To help people with depression and anxiety in Indonesia, we need to talk more about mental health openly. Because by working together to reduce stigma and access to mental health services, we can create a more supportive environment for those struggling with this condition. And to end today's presentation, I have prepared myself a quote, which is, mental health is just as important as physical health. So, let's break this silence and stigma surrounding these mental health issues. That's it for today's presentation. I hope you all enjoyed my presentation today. It was a great opportunity for me. And thank you all. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.